Salutations, everybody. As you know, this is Measure of an Episode. Our continuing mission is to explore what makes a Star Trek episode a good Star Trek episode and not just good TV. I'm Paul.
I'm Pablo.
Oh.
See what I did there?
Nice. Yeah. I heard what you did there.
Oh, yeah. Fair enough.
And according to our random episode generator this week, we will be talking about The Empath, the original series 312, The Empath. Trapped in an alien laboratory, Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. By the way, they do not use the Oxford comma in the Netflix blurb, just so everybody knows.
So it says Kirk, Spock, and McCoy?
It says Kirk, Spock, and McCoy meet an empath and are involved in a series of experiments, which is kind of not true.
Right.
I mean, it's true that they meet an empath. It's not really true that they're involved in a series of... I looked at this as just one giant experiment.
Just as they didn't have the Oxford comma, those are the sequence of events that happen. Say it again.
Trapped in an alien laboratory, Kirk, Spock, and McCoy meet an empath and are involved in a series of experiments.
Yeah, so they meet an empath and they are involved in a series of experiments.
Yeah, there should have been a comma. They're shy 2 commas in this thing.
Right.
Okay, so it starts with a beam down, and they go into a what looks to be an abandoned research facility of some kind.
Covered in dust. Yep. It was to establish that it was old. And
Right. No one had been there in a long time.
Right. And if you go into...
Which I thought it was going to be one of those things where they had just talked to them, 20 minutes ago, and now no one has been there in a long time. That's where I thought it was going. It did not go there.
No, it didn't.
Yeah. And Nimoy definitely has a cold, at least at the beginning of this episode.
Oh, I didn't catch it this time.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, and so very quickly, this strange sound starts engulfing them, and they seem to be disabled by the
noise.
sound.
Yeah. Yep.
By the noise. And they wake up in a black room.
Huge black room. Yes.
Huge black room, which was actually kind of cool. I liked that it was sort of this void, that they didn't really have any sense of where they were. They just kind of walked for a while, and then they came upon the unconscious woman.
Yes, the unconscious ballerina.
Right. So they try talking to her. It becomes clear that she's a mute,
right,
as per the doctor, right?
Yeah.
And they describe what makes her unable to speak.
Yeah.
But they only imply that she can't hear, and don't give us any reason why she can't hear. They talk about her vocal cords for like 20 minutes, but they don't give us any reason in terms of her ears. And mute means you can't talk or hear, right?
No, mute just means you can't speak. Then
why do they say she can't hear us?
I don't remember them saying that.
I think that they say she can't hear us. Anyway.
Right.
So it's funny. Kirk walks over to not Liza Minnelli and says, "We're not going to hurt you," while he's pointing a gun at her.
Right.
And he doesn't even realize that after he says that he's pointing a gun, he still keeps it pointed at her.
Yes.
Just in case.
Yeah. Right. Well, because I mean, as of that point, as far as he knows, she could be the one, because Spock makes a couple allusions to, he's like, well, there are these rock crystals on another planet that seem completely harmless until they attack you.
Which in retrospect feels very Star Wars prequels to me, where you're just saying the name, like you're putting a very earthly concept and you put a strange word in front of it, right? And then all of a sudden it's science fiction because you said, "Oh, the rabbits of Gondark." They're, like that kind of that kind of crap.
All right. So along with the rock crystals, Bones said like she's mute like the colony on whatever other planet. So there was something in his medical database that actually he could reference to based on her biological scan. Which for me personally, I thought it was a cool way of world building. For Spock to reference these rock crystals and for Bones to reference the mute colony. And I get what you're saying about how like the moment you put like it, it's these space rabbits.
Right. It doesn't make it. They don't like. I understand. You understand what they're trying to say without needing to do that, right? And which they did. They were fine with it, right? I was fine with it. When McCoy says that may be just normal for them, which I liked. I mean, I think that they were pointing out that just because they look human doesn't mean that it's normal for them. It's not normal for them to not have vocal cords.
Yeah, no, I definitely appreciated the fact that there was the world building, and there was, like, recognizing that there were aliens who could be alien in nature, and that's just how they were. Like, it wasn't like, oh, that's weird that she doesn't have vocal cords. He's like, no, that could be totally normal on her in her society.
Yeah, I appreciated that.
Yeah.
What I didn't appreciate was who made the decision to name a character Jim when there's already a character in the show named Jim.
I grant the confusion, but it wasn't Jim, right?
His name is Jim Kirk. Okay,
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen the show before.
Wait, which show we're talking about?
I don't know.
Talking about Breaking Bad, right?
You pay me to be here, and I'm here, okay?
Speaking of paying, let's just get it out of the way right now.
Everybody, we have a Patreon page.
You get access to the outtakes that we don't put in the podcast. You get access...
As opposed to the ones we leave in all
right.
the
time. You get access to other side conversations that are deep and thoughtful, but go way too off tangent. So we decide to cut out of the episode.
And it's a great way for us to pay the bills, or to help us pay the bills, because making a podcast, it's cheap. It's fairly cheap, but it's not free.
Yep.
Definitely not free. So,
and it's fun, but it is time consuming.
Yes. Yeah. And we all have day jobs. This isn't paying the bills yet, or, the regular bills, not the podcast bills. We still pay we're paying all the bills right now. Both the podcast bills.
I don't think they've got it yet, Paul. Do you want to explain a little bit more? Something about bills, right?
Yeah. And not Bill Shatner. Actual, money bills.
Who plays Jim Kirk, who is on Star Trek, which is what we were saying. She was named Jem.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay.
But when they start talking about Jim,
right?
Jim is obviously hurting.
Yes.
We don't know who they're talking about, right?
I got you. With a single syllable going Jim, it's really hard to say. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you say Jem or Jim?
Right. I feel sorry for Spock, right?
Jim is saving Jim. Wait, what?
Yeah. I don't know. And in the list of names they could have used.
Hey, like Bone said, it's better than Hey You.
I suppose.
I mean, but it also kind of makes sense. If you're sitting there looking at Jim and you see this girl right next to him, and you're talking about rock crystals, Jem would absolutely come to mind.
Yeah. So it was an economy of thought.
Right. Look, you were talking about rock crystals. His name's Jim. My mind went to Jem. Until we come up with a better name other than Hey You, her name's Jem.
Oh, by the way, whenever that happens, until we come up with a better fill in the blank, the coming up with a better fill in the blank never happens. So if you're going to decide on something, make it count, right? No matter what you're doing, whether you're naming a car, a boat, or a person.
Or a podcast.
Or a podcast. Make the first one count.
Yeah. So as a side note, we were discussing what to name this podcast, and we were like something like Measure of an Episode. And here you go.
And there you go. And it just worked.
Until something better comes along, we're going to call it Measure of an Episode. Guess what? Nothing better came along.
Right. And even if it does, we're not going to change it.
We're stuck with it now. Maybe in 12 years' time when we're wrapping up the podcast, something genius will come up. We'll be like, guys, it's no longer Measure of an Episode.
So they set her up as being an empath based on what the doctor intuits from her behavior. And his description of an empath, so he realizes this once she heals Kirk, right? He's got a thing on his head, and then she touches him in a 20-minute musical interlude.
Right.
And then
on close-ups.
Yeah. And he's healed, and McCoy's like, oh, she's an empath. And his definition of an empath has nothing to do with how she was able to heal him.
Right.
And I don't know if this was just the first time that the word empath had been used on TV in this sort of alien, supernatural, or science fiction-y way.
Mm-hmm.
But I wonder, is this there are empaths in the world, right? There are people who are very good at intuiting somebody's psychological or emotional state, right?
Right.
It's not a superpower. It's just something that some people are good at.
Yeah.
And so I wonder, did they appropriate this for science fiction in this episode? Is this another first on Star Trek?
I don't know.
Well, you're supposed to be the trivia guy. You're supposed to. I was hoping you had that loaded up. You're supposed to be like, well, funny you should say that.
Well, funny you should say that.
No,
if that is the case, it wasn't listed in the trivia anywhere I looked.
More trivia for everybody.
All right. So getting back to the truly outrageous Gem.
I guess they meet the aliens.
Yeah, they meet the aliens first.
They meet the aliens, and they find a way out with Spock's help.
Right.
And then they get out and they start running toward, back to wherever their ship. No, not to the ship. Whatever the.
Well, but hang on. Let's
entrance
talk about how they get out with Spock's help. So Spock uses the Vulcan death grip on the guy, and he falls to the ground. And they take his controller, and they escape. And immediately after they're out of sight, the guy gets back up.
I get the impression he was faking for the sake of the experiment.
Right. Yeah. So so clearly this was an episode where the audience or the writer knew the audience, which we'll get to in a second. But it was a bait and switch. They expected that person to be down and them to escape, and the guy got up like as if it was all part of the plan.
Yeah. That was very interesting. I like how they used the V pinch. It was a clever way of using it rather than just having Spock sneak up on somebody.
Right.
I appreciated it. And so that's obvious. It becomes obvious that is part of the plan, of the aliens' plan. Although we don't know their plan yet. We think they're just sort of torturing them for no reason.
Right.
And so they make it outside. They see the aliens outside as they're running toward the mirage of Scotty, of the landing party. And they have this kind of trippy scene where I guess they slow Kirk down with their little ray gun thing. And Kirk is trying to like crawl at them in slow motion.
Right.
At first I thought it was Billy Shatner just sort of walking slowly.
Well, he did, and then they actually slowed the film down. You can totally see that he is slowing his run down. And then when he starts to fall to the ground, they slowed it down even more. The overacting there was just ridiculous. But that part helped me like realize that this episode was, despite moving slow, like it was a really good slow burn of peeling back the layers. Like, at least for me, I didn't figure out what was happening until probably until after McCoy got abducted and started to be tortured. And even then, I needed them to actually explain why they were doing it to really know what was happening.
Yeah, I'm with you. I appreciated that there was constant forward motion of discovery in the episode.
Yeah.
It wasn't just sort of dwelling on each scene. Everything seemed to be in service of the plot.
Right.
So they're running toward they're all running outside toward the landing party because they think that they're safe.
Right.
So it wouldn't be a Star Trek episode if it weren't without a little manhandling, right? Because every time she's on screen again, Kirk is grabbing her by the arms and he's got her by the hands, got her by the arms, dragging her up a hill, dragging her down a hill. And she's for some reason having trouble running. I don't know why. They never talk about why she can't run or why Kirk is having such a hard time getting her to the landing party.
Right. Yeah. No, I was confused by that too. I thought so. McCoy, as they're running to the landing party, he deliberately tripped over a rock, and so I was thinking that there was going to be a scene where he sprained his ankle and she took it upon herself so he could continue running. And Kirk could carry her, but they didn't. They never went that way. So I was very.
Oh, do you think that's what happened though?
I mean, that's me speculating, and that's me trying to justify those two scenes. I wonder if it was in the script and it was taken out, or if it was just weird direction on their part.
Oh, that would be. I mean, I like that. That would be nice. And the fact that they don't talk about it afterward, that they just let that happen. But she's like doing this thing. Okay, let's talk about Jim for a second. I can't not talk about it anymore. Okay, we're going to call her not Liza Minnelli.
That's much shorter.
She clearly they hired a dancer for this role.
Yes.
And so I wonder obviously they told her to do that on purpose, right?
Which part?
That's just not when the way that she moves
in
the whole show.
Yeah. Like
she moves like it's an interpretive dance.
Right. The whole deliberation. Right. Yeah.
And even the way that she kind of acts when she's just seated, she kind of does this thing where everything is over exaggerated, like she's on stage.
Right. It's very dance expressions. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. And it would be funny if that's just the way that she is. Like she never turns that off. I thought it was a little heavy handed, but what I liked about it was they never talk about it. Like Spock is never like, she seems to be she seems to be trying to communicate with her movements and not her voice, right? They never say that.
Right.
And I like that. I like they don't go there.
No, I agree. And it was neat to have someone who wasn't trying to speak to them either. Like, she wasn't trying to, like, because they weren't understanding her, because she couldn't talk to them, she wasn't then trying to explain what she wanted or what she needed with gestures. Like, she just, it was as though, as a mute and as a mute from a planet, she didn't understand what they were doing and had no idea of how to communicate to them either.
But they understand each other at a certain point.
In a roundabout way, yeah. Like, there was...
we kind of get that she doesn't really understand them. She doesn't understand the humans, or rather the Federation people.
Right, doesn't understand the aliens.
Doesn't understand the aliens. So it's weird to me because the aliens are like, we only need one of you. The rest of you are free to go. When they're not free to go, they just brought them back down into the holding cell.
Right.
And so they're not free to go. They bring them back down into the thing, which is obviously all part of the experiment. This is all a manipulation to get a result.
Mm-hmm.
And they bring, so Kirk goes with them and somehow manages to get his shirt off. And they start, for some reason, it's not like they're whipping him. So he's suspended in the air, much of how I pictured you when you suspend yourself into air to do the podcast.
Right.
So they start torturing him. And I wonder, is this yet another Star Trek first of on-screen torture? Because they're obviously torturing him. Granted, this isn't the show 24.
Right.
There's torture in every single episode. But is it like this is the first time we've seen torture on television?
Being season 3, I'm going to say not. Because, there's the interracial kiss that happened in one of the earlier seasons. And to do so, they were being mentally tortured and forced to do things against their will.
Kind of takes the wind out of the sails of the interracial kiss. Right?
Oh, I know. Yeah. Like when I was hearing about it on a documentary about the first interracial kiss, I was like, oh, cool. And then I saw it in an episode and I was like, so you're telling me that just the fact that they were forced to kiss, like it wasn't a passionate kiss between two races. It was literally two aliens controlling these people, smashing their faces together. And that's the thing that people got upset about. Like, I would almost think that the racists would use that as evidence that you would only kiss someone from an opposing race if you were forced to. Yeah,
absolutely. Under duress.
Right. But then there's also the episode. Well, okay. So based on actual like torture. I don't know for sure, but
I don't even mean in Star Trek. I mean in the world.
I would be completely shocked. I wouldn't be impressed. I would be shocked if this was the first time the torture was shown on TV. Now, having said that, I will say that the Empath was not shown in the UK until the 90s for that reason.
Yeah. So they torture Kirk, and then they send him back. He seems like he's been through a lot, although it's unclear. Right. And then there's 20 more minutes of another 20-minute interlude of interpretive dance with Jim. Jim and Jim have another interpretive dance, and it's sort of brought out that he has the bends. The doctor says, "Oh, you have the bends," which never comes back because I guess they were torturing him. That's how they chose to torture him, was to make him scuba dive and then take a flight somewhere. That never comes back, right? They never explain why they chose to do it that way.
No. So the only thing that I was able to infer from that was because they said that he was going to be tortured, and they were the other two people couldn't handle what they presented to themselves. They said something like, we're testing your courage, and it's whatever you find like the worst thing to be. And so my interpretation was that his torture was something that caused him to have the bends, and he survived it, but barely.
Oh, I see. Although that does prompt the second time in an episode in our 9 episodes so far that someone on screen has said decompression chamber.
Right.
I don't know if you noticed that.
Yep. I heard it, and I was like, oh, it seems to be a running theme in Star Trek. I mean, they're dealing with space.
I guess that's true. I mean, space is in itself a decompression changer.
Yeah. Well, and because Kirk was talking about that. What did he say? Bones or Spock said something about how like man wasn't supposed to do something, and Kirk said, "Oh, but we're supposed to travel through space."
Yeah, it was a good retort. I appreciated it.
Yeah. Overall, the writing on this episode was really good.
I thought it was great.
Yeah.
I mean, it clipped along for me. It was a slow episode of television, but in terms of all the flips and turns that it was doing, it was cool.
Yeah, I mean, it was a 60s episode. It was a 60s TV series, so it is going to move slower, but it continued to move. Whereas the previous episode, The Day of the Dove, like it presented the situation, we figured it out, and then they were just spinning its wheels and kind of hitting us over the head with it over and over until the end. They were like, "Oh no, let's be friends." Yeah, and this one I really like because it kept the mystery through the entire episode, and it only gave us like just enough to feel like we were getting more information. But I know that like if it gave us any more, we would have been able to figure it out.
And I appreciated the mystery. I think the mystery needed to be revealed as slowly as it had been.
Absolutely. No, I agree.
Yeah. So they go through this thing where the aliens tell the group that you're going to have to decide who gets killed. We're going to kill one of you. And Kirk gets to decide. And then the doctor knocks out Kirk because he's going to make a bad decision or because he's in pain.
Well, he gives the excuse that it was because he's under mental duress and he's just been through physical duress, so he needs to rest so his body can recover. We deduce after his actions with Spock that it was because Kirk had to make the choice, Bones eliminated him making the choice. And then Spock was like, "Oh, thank you so much, for doing that. Now I get to make the choice and I'm the one who's dying." And Bones was like, "No, you're not."
Yeah. And so the aliens then, by default, take the doctor and keep his shirt on to torture him. Yeah. His shirt remains on.
Well, I think they're both contractually obligated. Kirk says in every episode, my shirt comes off, and Bones says, no matter what, my shirt stays on. If we're swimming, I'm swimming in a unitard.
Or showering. It'd be great if he was showering or taking a bath with his leotard on. I don't know if there's another interpretive dance interlude before...
Not before Bones, not before McCoy.
Right.
No. Yeah.
Okay, so McCoy gets tortured. How they're torturing him, it's not clear, but it's clear they're doing it without touching him, except when he comes back to the holding cell, his shirt is tattered, but his skin is fine underneath. And so I just think that they just took scissors to it just to be, for some reason. I think maybe because McCoy had said that was his favorite shirt, that was part of the torture.
I was wondering why they put that in the script. Seemed so out of place when he first said it.
It did.
No, I think it was kind of the same thing. Like just how Kirk had this. This is probably like where the idea solidified for me. Where Kirk had the bends because of whatever he was having afflicted to him. McCoy, same thing. They didn't touch him, but he, some kind of direct stimulus on him that tore his shirt and gave him, what looked like radiation burns. He was blistered and all kind of scarred and charred on the face.
Right. Yeah.
It was kind of like how Spock looked in the second one. But yeah, so that's the fact that Kirk had the bends and then McCoy, even though we never saw any physical contact, looked like so beat up when he was finally let down. That's what made me think that you come up with your own torture and you physically are affected by it, even though nothing's actually touching you.
There's a point where Billy Shatner says the word offense, but he doesn't say offense.
He says offense. Yep.
Yeah, because clearly he's never heard that word spoken before. He just read it in the script and just said offense. Well, I see. I will say it that way.
Because he also said offended.
Is he Canadian?
Oh, I don't know. Is that a thing that Canadians say? I'll have to check that out.
It makes the most sense, right?
Yeah.
So I did actually notice at the beginning of the episode that they don't have rank pins on their lapels.
Correct.
And so I was like, oh, they must have just come out with that in Next Gen. But then later in the episode, I realized that their rank is indicated by frills on their sleeves.
Yeah.
No idea. Yeah. First time. That must be the first time they're doing this because it's the first time that I saw it.
I did not know that was a thing either until Discovery. And they did not realize it when they were filming, and they actually had to go back in and put in the rankings on the sleeves digitally after the first season, I think.
Oh God.
Yeah.
What a waste of money.
Right?
What a waste of money. People don't learn lessons from, like, for example, the reason the Marvel movies do well is because they have Marvel nerds writing the scripts and making the movies, right?
Yes.
You don't hire people who have never heard of Star Trek to make a Star Trek show.
Well, and if you do, you bring in the nerds to make sure you're doing it right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. They got their phasers, like, magically taken away from them.
Right.
But they got to keep the tricorder, which allowed them to assess all the medical issues, which we kind of learned why. And they got to keep the controller that they took away. And I was like, if they're able to just magically teleport away or scientifically teleport their phasers away, like how come they left them with the controller? And then they talked about that.
Well, and they're obviously listening to everything that they say, even when the aliens aren't in the room. So when they're sort of scheming to when they're trying to figure out the little, whatever device they stole from the aliens. I mean, it's surprising they didn't think of that. Like, they're probably watching us right now, right? We should not talk about it openly.
But then it turned out that it didn't matter because they were supposed to keep it. And it was just a really good example of all of the things that were brought up in the script were addressed at some point, either directly or indirectly. And that goes back to the rankings being on the sleeves, because it's important to have a fan around when you're writing an episode, or have a fan write an episode, which is what happened in this instance. This was
a fan wrote an episode.
Yeah.
Or wrote this episode.
Yeah. It was a fan submitted script, and they liked it enough to actually commission it.
Oh, interesting. I would love to read what was actually submitted versus what they changed.
Right.
Like what did they change anything? Or did they have to sort of make it on brand?
Mm-hmm. But I think one of the reasons why the episode worked so well, there was light banter, there was good dialogue, is because first off, it was written by a fan. And so, they kind of knew the characters well enough, and it wasn't just a writing room trying to put out a script. So they had more time to be with the script. So it allowed them to kind of pass it around to people who were also fans and say, well, what if you did this? I don't know if that's what happened, but it gave her the opportunity to do so, to make sure that the script was as polished as it could be.
Well, and it also, fan stuff aside, it could have been also that when you work on a fan script, that's all you're not answering to anybody, and you have as much time as you need to work on it. And so when you have that much time to flesh it out, it's going to be better versus when you're in a writer's room and you have deadlines, you don't have as much time to really develop something and to think about it. And so I know that they were doing that with Next Gen too, that they would consider outside scripts, which is totally alien in today's world of television.
Yeah.
There's no way that anybody, it's interesting because the writers and the directors and the actors are all super present on social media, and you can actually interact with them one-on-one through those platforms. But there is a huge wall in terms of what they'll consider for submissions. Even if you submit something to them, they say anything you submit, we own immediately. So if you email them like just to their general email saying, I got this great idea for a Star Trek episode, what if Spock and McCoy do this and do this? They immediately own it. Because they don't want somebody coming back if they accidentally use it, even if they don't use it and they accidentally do the same concept in their own script. They don't want somebody coming back and saying, oh, well, you obviously ripped that off and I'm not compensated for it. So they do this blanket catch-all where they say, anything you submit, just know you're welcome to submit it, but we own it immediately and you don't get anything for it.
Interesting. I guess with the advent of email, that makes sense, because what I remember, and maybe this was just, the rumor mill, but they never opened any delivered mail. Especially if it was a script, because they didn't want to have the opportunity for a lawsuit if the idea came up separately from somebody else.
Yeah, same thing.
Yeah.
Same thing.
But it's kind of the exact opposite. Like, instead of saying we don't open anything, it's, hey, just so you know, if you send this, it's now ours.
Yeah. So I do wonder, is it in the original script that was submitted, or was it a writer on the show who gave Spock a little bit of sarcasm at the end of the show?
Oh, I know. And going back, Leonard Nimoy, without changing his expression, completely changed his expression from bemusement to annoyance.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't want to say it's not in character for him to have sarcasm, because I don't know the show well enough at this point, but it seems out of character for him to have that.
Oh, no. He does have that dry condescension quite a bit. And that's part of what makes Spock. But that was such a good moment with all those three characters because it was written by a fan.
Right. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think it's probably. I don't know if I'm willing to concede that the reason it's such a good episode is because it was written by a fan. I mean, someone could have written in with a really good, solid concept, which was then reworked into something that was as good as what we saw, right? That explanation is also plausible.
Right.
Because they weren't slouches at the writer's room.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's fair.
So it could have been that. But, I mean, it does make more sense that a pretty heady, well-developed idea like this would be because of a fan having all the time in the world to develop it.
Exactly. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm coming from. I think you're right that like the writers in the writer room polished the script. But yeah, like having all the time in the world to finesse a script is going to make it better than having 3 weeks to crank the next one out.
Right. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say one of the things that I really liked was the hanging, them hanging from the chains.
Uh-huh.
I was just really impressed by that effect. I was like how I had no idea how they did that by having them, in chains but still floating there without having the weight of the body pulling on the chains. I was
right. Yeah,
that
was interesting. Yeah,
yeah.
that didn't even occur to me. Yeah,
I was really impressed by that effect.
I wonder if because we only ever see them a close up from in front of them,
mm-hmm.
or directly behind them without seeing them. So they must have been wearing a harness or something like that around their midsection,
right?
And then so they never pan around them, so we never get to see how they're being suspended. So that's probably how they do it, because I don't think we ever see him actually hanging from the front. I think it's always a close up.
No, we didn't. Yeah, and what was funny too was Bones got it. Like he was hung cross style, like the hanging cross, and as was Kirk. And when it went to the front, Bones had his hands stretched out that way, and Kirk had his hands hanging in front of him, like he was like his wrists were shackled. And I was like, the close-ups don't match what you're doing, sir.
Well, again, screens were 12 inches at their biggest.
Right, and he wanted to make sure that everybody saw his biceps. I get it.
Right.
The TV trope that was in this that always bothers me is when people don't they're like, you'll get your answers in time, or like like in Lost when we were talking about the door, like Jack wanting to get out of the door and Ben, right, Linus, being, he's like, open the door. He's like, if I do that, we will all die. Like, why not just say we're 30 feet underwater and we will drown? Like, go over and look in the window and you will see fish flying around. Like,
but it was gripping, because it's kind of proof that the mystery is always greater than what the answer is. But that doesn't mean you don't have to, like, you have to know the answer. Right. You have to know it.
Right. Well, but
you can't not know it.
But ignoring the frustration of Lost, I was thinking about, like, why didn't the aliens explain what they were doing? And it kind of makes sense at the end. Like, they didn't want to skew the experiment. They wanted to make sure that they were as blind as she was, because otherwise that she could have picked up on them, like, feeling comfortable with knowing what was happening, or, something like that. But the other thing too was, if they really did feel like they were as, like, that superior over humanity, then I was thinking, like, scientists don't usually explain what they're doing, what's happening to the rats, And so it makes a little bit more sense. Like, it's like, I don't need to explain this to you because you can't comprehend what we're doing anyway.
Yeah, I mean, if the rats started speaking English, though,
right,
and asked, would we tell them? That is the question.
Or would we just scream and grab a book to smash them? Yeah.
Wait a minute. You smash rats with books?
If the book is big enough. I mean, I don't. Well, first off, I don't smash rats. I do not have a rat problem.
You were very handy with that solution to a rat problem. I'm just curious.
I feel like I've seen that before. Like, not a talking rat and then smashed with a book, but like taking the
which would be such a waste.
The largest, heaviest object, which I'm thinking, like a encyclopedia in Braille.
Yeah. Where just the A's is 20 volumes long.
Right. So would you count that random side scene to Scotty and Sulu as the B plot?
I think that plot or that scene was only there to show that they were not doing anything to rescue them.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And that's all it was. I mean, I don't think the TOS so far has a B plot.
Right.
I don't think that they're built in yet. I mean, I guess maybe the B plot in all of these episodes is the subtext. The problem is that our criteria requires there to be a B plot.
Right.
And I don't know if I would consider this a good television episode. I would not consider this a good Star Trek episode, because, I mean, what bit of science fiction do they use to solve any problems?
Well, they kind of are. I mean, they're isolated, which obviously that could happen anywhere. But they're trying to teach another to have self-sacrifice over self-preservation. And it was being taught through emotions and through observation, not through direct instruction or torture.
It was being taught by example, or at least they were exposing her by example. But that could easily be something that could happen without technology. There was nothing about any of the beings in this episode that required them to be aliens, really. I could easily see the two aliens being just Bond villains, right? Who had no emotional expression, and they were just sort of villainous. And the lady could easily have been just a regular human. What overlapping theme or underlying science fiction theme was there in this episode? Other than they were aliens. But did they have to be aliens for this to happen?
See, I feel like, yeah. So one of the things that I consider is could this episode be shown on a different TV series? And I don't feel like it could have been.
This could definitely have been sort of a bottle episode of Lost, where two of the survivors get kidnapped and experimented on. And we never hear from them again, and we never hear about it again because that was how they wrote Lost.
Right.
But it could have easily been just two of the others experimenting on the survivors without changing even very much of the dialogue, or rather the concept, because the dialogue is a little heavy-handed.
Right, but I feel like what they are trying to teach, I don't feel like could be on another show. Like the premise in general, yes, like kidnapping people and having psychological experiments to try to get them to understand something. That's been on different shows before, but to specifically understand self-sacrifice over self-preservation, because they could bring them back to life if it didn't work.
But they never said that they would. I guess they do bring them back to life at the end of the episode. They bring McCoy back to life, or rather, they heal him.
Mm-hmm.
And do they heal not Liza Minnelli? I can't remember. Does she get? No, she heals herself.
Yeah.
No, does she die? I can't remember. I think she dies.
Does she?
Because she sacrifices herself. Is that? Did we just miss the entire point of the episode? I can't remember, and I just watched it an hour ago.
Yeah, I don't.
I think she dies.
Well, because they talk about how like they've lost all sense of emotion, and that's where the joke comes in at the end with Spock. They've lost all compassion, and that's when they consider it, and they're like, oh my gosh, maybe they're right, and that's why they bring Bones back to life. But I can't remember if they bring NLM back to life.
Well, they all die anyway. Because, I mean, it was very fuzzy for me what the relationship was with her race, with Liza Minnelli's race, and the aliens' race. Because they said, we can only save one planet, or one person, or one race,
one planet,
or something like that.
Yeah.
And we're judging whether or not her race is worthy of being saved. And I got the impression that the aliens' race was already dead, or had already succumbed to something, or had resolved themselves to dying.
That's
very unclear to me. Yeah,
that's what I got too. Was that they had already resolved themselves to the fact that they were going to die in this supernova, and they were trying to consider which alien race was going to be the ones to save. And I mean, this is me completely projecting, but it sounded like they had a race that they could save, but it just wasn't as good as this one if they could just learn self-sacrifice.
Yeah, I felt like if they developed that aspect more, it would have been more science fiction-y, because it required there to be some kind of weird relationship between two races. And I don't know what that was. It was just they had chosen this particular person who was being made to volunteer to speak for their entire race in terms of if they are willing to self-sacrifice. And it's very fuzzy. And I think that maybe on purpose because they didn't have time or whatever. But that to me, that sounds more like a science fiction element. It's just not fleshed out enough. This felt very psychological, and it felt very diving deep into the human psyche. And obviously the human emotion prevails and intellect does not. They don't reason their way out of something. They don't even techno babble their way out of something. They just use pure emotion to win. So in a way that kind of disqualifies it from that particular criteria for me.
Yeah, I mean, these are not invalid points. And so what my struggle is, like, I really like this episode. The way it's handled and the characters and the resolution and all that sort of thing. And so is my liking of the episode coloring my judgment and trying to wanting to amend our criteria so that this episode fits because I liked it? Or was this really just good TV and it was not a good Star Trek episode? I mean, because as of right now, we're sitting at 6 of 8 of our episodes are not Star Trek based on our criteria.
Yeah.
So, I mean, is it just that we don't have the right criteria, or is it that because we're randomizing it, we just happen to be hitting so many episodes that aren't, and we're going to get a whole rush of episodes that are?
I think it's the latter on both counts. I think that it is a really good episode of television, just doesn't have to be Star Trek. And I think that because I don't think we've had any season 1 episodes of any of the shows. So it could be that a lot of the season 1 is more heavy on the sci-fi because it is Star Trek and science fiction. And so later into the series, they start to get a little bit more comfortable and can explore different aspects using the characters, but without there needing to be some kind of science fiction aspect.
Right.
But in this particular, I mean, this is season 3 again. It's not that we were wrong about our criteria. It's that they are intentionally stepping out of what we would consider a good Star Trek episode just to do some exploration.
Okay. So then with that being said, do we want to amend anything to like kind of factor in DS9 where they're playing in the sandbox and they're still following certain rules to make it Star Trek other than, I'm playing with these characters, that makes it Star Trek? Or
I still think it's too early.
You still think it's too early? Okay. I'm fine with that.
I still think it's too early.
All right. Well, let's see what we're watching next.
God, how can this possibly be? Deep Space Nine, episode 310, Fascination. Not only we're doing like every other episode is a Deep Space Nine, it's all season 3.
Right.
It's all done with a random number generator.
Right.
So
I mean, do you want to
No,
no,
we can't do that.
Okay.
We can't do that.
Okay.
The fans would be just so disappointed if they did. The Bajoran Gratitude Festival. Oh.
Right. I'm in. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter the rest. If we got a Bajoran Gratitude Festival, right, sign me up. I'm excited to see it. Already.
An annual celebration is about to get underway, and both Kira and O'Brien await the arrival of their loves. Oh, fuck.
Oh.
Don't say like, oh, I remember this one. It sounds good.
So it's Kaiko? No, it's Kaiko Roofing. It's Kiko, I'm pretty sure. And I was thinking it was Shakar, but I think this is before the episode we last watched. So it's got to be Burrell. So I think this is a
none of those names mean absolutely nothing to me.
So Shakar was the guy that she went to go see. That was the last episode we saw. The episode that it was named after him. And Burrell was the person that she was praying to. So if it is Burrell, spoiler alert, he dies at the end.
Right. Well, I mean, I've always said whenever I watch Star Trek that there aren't enough gratitude festivals.
Right. I know. I mean, seriously, one planet once a year? What the heck?
I mean, obviously you have to have one of these. I'm sure we're going to get one of these once a season, and there are 7 of them. So,
well, and actually, I don't remember which episode it was, but in the original series, there was one of the episodes we just watched. There was a deleted bit of dialogue where they were supposed to be celebrating Peace Day, which was the day that all of the countries stopped warring and working on the larger project of actually exploring the universe out there. So there was supposed to be some kind of gratitude celebration that got ignored because that's how they're supposed to be.
Well, damn it.
Right. Well, I mean, it's like you said, there's not enough.
I'm glad we're front loading all of the good episodes of Deep Space Nine.
It's just going to make the backside. It's just going to make the backside, so much harder to watch.
I know. So far, we've probably turned thousands, if not millions, of people off of Star Trek just based on our selection.
Right. Well, I mean, I hope not, because this is 10 out of over 700. Like, that's less than 1% of the show. We could literally be getting all the bad episodes out of the way, and the rest of the 12 years, we're like, yeah, good Star Trek, good TV.
Right. So I guess my plea to the listeners, please don't give up. It's going to get better. I
Keep
promise.
listening. Keep reviewing.
Keep listening. Keep reviewing.
Submitting to Patreon.
Yeah. Please. Just give us a chance. Give Star Trek a chance, even though it really doesn't want you to. It's, in fact, begging you not to. But we are begging you to please give it a chance. And with that,
let's go watch it.
Let's go watch it.